Well, thank you. It's not often one is given the privilege of being introduced by loving family and loving friends. But we are all in this together, and when I say we all, I don't only mean the March of the Living Family. I mean we all, the Jewish people throughout the world. The challenges that we face as a people, with Israel in our heart and at the centerpiece of our being, the challenges that we face as the Jewish people are unfortunately and dauntingly reminiscent of that which each of you teach to your students, to the parents, to the family, to the survivors, to the liberators, and to the public about the tragic destruction or attempted destruction of our entire people just in this last century. We must develop strategic responses to the diplomatic, legal, and physical threats that are facing Israel and the Jewish people. Trust me when I say the challenges will not subside without our activism in addressing each and every one. The challenges will not subside unless we stand up as a people, speak loudly, clearly, and directly to our friends as well as to our enemies. We must change public opinion. We must see to it that we have knowledgeable and educated young people and seniors and everyone in between who are willing and prepared and confident to stand up and speak out, speak up, write, act, think, do, drive, step back, revisit, and come up with new strategies, because the enemies we are facing are indeed serious in their attempt for some of them to annihilate us, for others to destroy our good name, for others to take away our homeland, for others to simply drive us into the sea, and for others to even just simply have fun with us by putting Jude on a window or by putting armbands back on. I am not here to ring a bell of alarm that doesn't need to be rung, because that bell already is ringing around the world. Let's first put it in the context of Israel, because we must. She lives in a dangerous neighborhood. On the north, you have Lebanon with Hezbollah and Syria with now the Islamic State, both threatening Israel's borders with not just cross-border attacks, but with threats of annihilation. Hezbollah, funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, is indeed sitting with more rockets than the world cares to even care about. And those rockets are pointed at one target, and that it is Israel. And I don't mean only Israel in areas that are disputed areas or areas that are referred to as occupied areas. I mean mainstream Israel, because it is their goal, you should know, and I trust you do know, to drive all Israel, all Israelis, all Jews out of the territory they call Palestine as theirs, not Palestine as we saw it at the beginning of the last century. On the south, we indeed have Egypt, that has been a cold friend, a hot neighbor, and under al-Sisi, the new president, appears to be taking a strong new position, one that says we must change Muslim terrorism. We must stand up, and we must put down even Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt is moving toward getting Gaza under control by shutting the tunnels and by attempting to stop the terrorism. And yet the attacks by Hamas not only cross border into southern Israel, but all the way up to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and other areas is not only a huge threat, but it is a continued reality. Jordan, a neighbor that entered into a peace agreement that has been a cold peace agreement, but yet Jordan recently entered into an agreement to buy Israeli gas. And Israel supports the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, and King Abdullah and Prime Minister Netanyahu have had multiple meetings, both those in the press and those not in the press. But can we count on Jordan forever? We cannot, because the Islamic State is challenging Jordan just like they are challenging America, Israel, and the rest of the free world, but also the Arab world. We have on the west, Turkey. Turkey was a very close ally of the United States and also of Israel. It still has an allied relationship with the United States, but when it comes to Israel, the relationships under Erdogan, the head of the government, have dramatically reduced as Erdogan, some believe, see the establishment of a new Islamic caliphate, one that will indeed rebuild the Turkish Ottoman Empire, because Palestine was part of that empire. Can we count on Turkey, which attacks Israel verbally, which walks out or refuses to go to meetings? Most recently, just last week in Munich at the security conference of the OSCE, Turkey was scheduled to appear. When it was announced that Israeli ministers would be appearing, Turkey said they are not going to go to the most important security conference dealing with Europe and the Middle East, and they boycotted it because of the sheer presence of an Israeli minister. And what country have I left off? The Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's worst sponsor of terror in history. In Argentina, Iran has taken down the Israeli embassy, AMIA, and some like me believe Alberto Nisman, Oliver Shalom. Iran has attacked U.S. embassies all over. Iran has sponsored Hezbollah, Hamas, and all of the Palestinian jihad organizations. Iran will not stop until it gets what it wants, and that is even more than the nuclear weapon. Iran wants the annihilation of Israel and the Jewish people, and says so publicly. Prime Minister Netanyahu has a phrase, and I will paraphrase. It goes like this: words matter. When people threaten you with death, you'd better listen. The Islamic Republic of Iran most recently has talked about death to America, death to Israelis, and for us that means death to the Jews. Look around this room. Think about your communities, whether it be communities in Latin America or in the United States or in Europe. We know what has just occurred in Paris. We know what has just occurred in various other places, and we know the threats that we are facing. In the news this week alone, in Durban, South Africa, they call for no Jews. In governments, halls of government around the world, they call for Israel to be criticized, boycotted, a divestment of assets, Israel to be sanctioned. In countries around the world, it's not just a matter of supporting the establishment of the Palestinian state, which has observer status at the United Nations, but it is a matter of in the halls of government where the issues are debated between whether or not to endorse the Palestinian state, it always turns to maligning Israel as a justification. And what is it that is said? Israel is an apartheid, racist, criminal state. And those aren't just words that are thrown out by academicians or by speech givers. Let's take a look at the legal challenges that are being wrought upon Israel, Israelis, the Jewish people throughout the world. At the International Court of Justice in 2004, an advisory opinion was issued at the request of the United Nations General Assembly. And that advisory opinion calls Israel to be in violation of international law because of not only settlements in the occupied territories, but also because of the actual construction of the wall, which is referred to as a wall rather than as the terrorism prevention security fence, which it really is. When the Pope recently went, within the past year, to Israel, what was the most prominent photograph that people saw? The second most prominent photograph was the Pope at the Western Wall. But the most prominent photograph was the Pope with his hand on the separation barrier, the apartheid wall, the security fence. Call it what you want, but the image of the Pope, a man of peace, saying essentially, tear down this wall because it is designed to separate people, racist style, as if in South Africa. With the challenges that I have just outlined to you, and I've left many of them off, I want to remind you that just barely 10 years ago, the Second Intifada ended. I don't know if you can see it from there, but the book that I wrote called The Hague Odyssey has a photograph on the front of a bombed out bus. And what the world didn't care about at the time, doesn't care about today, is that inside this bus were real, live people. In Syria today, 210,000 people have been killed, and the world has done relatively nothing. At the UN Human Rights Council, Syria isn't the topic. North Korea isn't the topic. The Islamic Republic of Iran isn't the topic. The topic is Israel, Israel, Israel as a human rights violator. That's what they talk about at the UN Human Rights Council. They don't talk about the people who were murdered inside this bus or inside cafeterias or inside other public venues such as Sbarro Pizza or such as a synagogue. What I suggest to you, must develop here in this room, because each of you are crucially important leaders, teachers, advocates, emissaries, spokespeople. You are knowledgeable. You are committed. The lessons of the Shoah, the lessons of the Holocaust are lessons that have to be taught to more people. They have to see with their eyes the gas chambers. They have to see with their eyes the ovens. They have to hear and feel and walk hand in hand with the few survivors that are remaining. We are obligated, I believe, to develop together strategic responses to the diplomatic, the legal, and the physical threats being visited upon not just Israel, but the Jewish people throughout the world. Briefly, let's talk about diplomatic responses, and then legal responses, and then physical threats. Diplomatic. With the state of Palestine seeking full status at the United Nations and not yet having gained that status, it has instead turned to the international community to be accepted into various groups, from UNESCO to now the seeking status at the International Criminal Court. And what is its goal? To malign the good name of Israel and to attempt to hold Israel criminally accountable for defending and protecting its people. That is embedded in the work of the United Nations, not only at the UN Human Rights Council and at UNESCO, but at the UN General Assembly itself. The UN Human Rights Council, as we sit here, is undergoing a review of the Gaza 2014 response by Israel to the thousands of rockets that were launched upon Israel. And only Israel is being accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The United States and Israel have both said that they are not going to dignify this investigation, this inquiry, this criminal inquiry. But I dare tell you, and I predict to you, that come next month in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Council will receive a bastardizing report criticizing Israel, saying that Israel's response to the rockets were disproportionate, saying that Israel's failure to protect innocents was wrong and criminal, saying that attacking the UNRWA school, even though the UNRWA school was hiding missile emplacements, and not even barely dealing with the heinous crime of Hamas to have children in front of the fighters, using those children as shields. The UN Human Rights Council will reference, I predict, those issues as context. But the recommendation, I fear and predict, will be a recommendation that Israel must be held accountable for crimes against humanity and war crimes. And it's part of the long plan that we have seen at the United Nations for 4 decades, from Zionism equals racism to the attempt to call Israel the apartheid racist criminal state. Because if you make racism criminal, if you make Zionism criminal, if you make Zionism and racism criminal, if you have apartheid, then you have the whole world calling for one country to act in a different way. One country, the Jew, Israel. One country. Diplomatically, Israel, I don't believe, should have boycotted the UN Human Rights Council Commission inquiry going on. Instead, it should be standing up and fighting loudly to protect the good name, to protect the right under international law of Israel to defend her people, because it's not only a right, it's an obligation. And what do I fear will happen just next month when the UN Human Rights Council adopts that report? That report will be sent to the International Criminal Court, to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who will then say, we have an application of the state of Palestine for membership in the International Criminal Court. And Palestine has asked us to investigate crimes by Israel. Now the prosecutor will say, I must investigate, because look what the UN Human Rights Council has just said. So in these months, as we prepare to go back and walk together as a family, remembering the past, let us think about the future as we remember the past, because the lessons are lessons that must be revisited now. The diplomatic responses have legal implications as well, and the failure of diplomatic responses have legal implications, because the bashing of Israel in the public opinion, in the court of public opinion, The bashing of Israel in every aspect of the United Nations. It's wearing, it's tearing. It is hard for the Prime Minister to go to the United Nations, but he does it, and he stands up and he speaks. And if he only says one sentence, it should be Dayenu. When he says, I come here as the head of my government, responsible to protect and defend my people. Every nation in the world has the right and obligation to defend her people, and so does Israel. But only Israel is held to that, not just a second-class status, a third and a fourth-class status, because it is Israel, the Jew. Let us remember these lessons of the Holocaust as we look at diplomatic issues around the world and in your country and in your community. In the United States, there are members of the House, members of the Senate, governors, and members of both parties who believe in the right of Israel and the future of Israel. You have to activate them. And in your countries, whether it be in Argentina or in Mexico or in Costa Rica or in Canada or in the EU or anywhere else, we must stand up and get to the diplomats, because the diplomats can make a difference. Just in the last recent period in Sweden, they agreed to recognize the Palestinian state. And yesterday, the government of Sweden said to the Palestinian representatives there to open the new embassy or mission of Palestine in Sweden with our money, $100 to $200 million or euros, I'm not sure which. There comes responsibility. You have to get back to the peace table. You have to stop teaching hatred. You have to stop inciting violence. You have to stop permitting rockets and attacks and terrorist attacks. And they have said there has to be an appropriate approach. That's diplomatic speak for appropriate approach. Trust me when I tell you, in their minds, the appropriate approach includes castigating Israel at the UN, adopting resolutions holding Israel responsible and liable, and taking it over to the UN's court, not just the International Court of Justice that already has dealt with the terrorism fence, the wall, but now to, as I said before, the International Criminal Court, to prosecute the ministers, the IDF officers, to prosecute those who work to protect and defend Israel. This is what we are seeing in this cycle. So the diplomatic response is important, because when you go to see in your community with your March of the Living students and parents and family, when you go to see a president, a prime minister, a foreign minister, an ambassador, and you talk with them about understanding Israel has the right and the obligation to defend her people, you may make a difference in how they will vote. You may make a difference in the message they send. You may make a difference in whether they vote yes, no, or abstain, or don't show up in protest. You may make a difference in whether the boycott advances or doesn't advance. Let's talk for a moment about strategic responses in the legal arena. Some of us, my law firm and others, have stood up against terrorism on behalf of the people who were murdered in this bus and in other cases. And it has made a difference. It's made a difference in standing up against Libya. It's made a difference in standing up against terrorists funding banks. It's made a difference in standing up against various organizations. The PLO is being held on trial in New York as we sit here. Whether the case will be won or lost, they are being held to justice in a court. Iran has been held to justice in courts and assessed tens of billions of dollars. Syria has been assessed $5 to $10 billion. those countries pay attention to that because they can't restore relations with the United States without getting off the terror list. And the countries on the terror list are countries that know eventually, if they want good relations with the most important country in the world, the United States, they have to put a stop to terror. And most of that terror is targeted against Israel and against our Jewish communities. So the legal responses are important tools. But I want to close with the strategic responses in the physical area. In every one of your communities, surely you have security at the shul, at the day schools, in Paris, at the kosher grocery, where they didn't have real security, and a target of a kosher grocery taking the lives of 4 people taken to Israel to be buried. When we just look at that, but also look at the diplomatic talk about that, you will see that our failure to have a coordinated strategic response in the diplomatic area, the legal area, and in the physical threat area only causes us to again be at risk and be hit. Let me repeat that. Our failure as a Jewish community around the world to properly deal with, respond, and stand up to the need for strategic responses in the diplomatic area, the legal area, and the physical security area sets the groundwork for us to be attacked again. When the President of the United States calls, as he did in the last 2 days, the attack in Paris as random, rather than what it is, a targeted attack on a kosher grocery, then you can see how the failure to have a coordinated assessment of the diplomatic problems we are facing, the legal problems we are facing, the physical problems we are facing, allows people, including people like the President of the United States, whether he misspoke or not, to spread the word that in a way it wasn't so bad. It certainly didn't target the Jews, but it did target the Jews. So let me conclude with this. As we prepare to go, I urge each of you, you have in your hands the brilliant minds of young people. You have the opportunity to mold them, to give them strength through education, to help them understand Jewish history over thousands of years, to help them understand contemporary Jewish history through the eyes of the Shoah, but to help them understand the attacks that they will see on their college campuses. Yesterday we saw a video that Michael Soberman put out. That first video that we didn't have time to talk about. That video was of a violent demonstration at a university calling for jihad. Raise your fist for jihad. My friends, who are the targets of the jihad? They are us. When you go home, please take as your sacred duty the opportunity to exercise the right and the obligation we have to teach, and to teach, because it's only through learning that these young people will be able to stand up in their international relations classes, stand up in their political science classes, stand up when they walk through the quad of their university and not feel as though they have to take off their kippah, take off their mezuzah or their star, or worse, walk away so that they are not seen and can get from class to class or dorm to dorm or activity to activity safely. The threats upon Israel and the Jewish people today, diplomatically, legally, and physically, are enormous. They must be recognized, and we must teach our young people to have the strength, to have the wisdom, to have the knowledge, to have the ability, to have the confidence that we are not bad people. We, Israel and the Jewish people, have a proud tradition. We have contributed to society, we have contributed to life, to culture, to the arts, to the sciences, to humanity, to democracy, to freedom. We stand for what is right, and there must come a time soon when we can again do so proudly, and that will only come if our younger generation feels the confidence to again stand proudly together and stand safely together, that they can stand up and speak, and after coming back from Auschwitz and Birkenau, will be able to say, I have seen, I have heard, I have learned, and let me share with you the truth. Because when they feel the confidence in every one of our communities and on every campus to stand up for the truth of the right and the goodness and the good name of Israel and the Jewish people, only then will we build a better future for tomorrow. Thank you to each of you for what you do.